Hey, this is Peter. Today I'm in the Lake District near Keswick, and the reason why I've come back here after so many years is this is back when I was in university, film school, let's call it. It was a rite of passage that each first year student had to come up to Keswick as part of a group to make a film here. And so you would go with your group, who are a bunch of people you never really knew that well, and you would be given roles, and then you would go off and make your film. And it's a great test because even though I don't necessarily approve of film school, I think everything you learn from me. There's my Patreon, you can find me. But I feel that this little rite of passage was a great kind of starter in going out your comfort zone and getting the information of a different kind of world. Most of us were from the city. We've never been to a place like this before. And so we were dropped in the middle of, let's say, nowhere and told, film what you have around you. Well, what do you have around you? You have lakes, you have mountains, and you have little villages and maybe kind of touristy parts, and there's even a club, there's even a different, who would have thought, right? But with this little area of the world, you had to make some kind of a film. Doesn't matter really what it was about, but you had to make a film. And what that prepares you for, I think, is maybe when you go back to the city, when you go back to places which you're familiar with, your localized areas, even if you're not going to branch out, it's important to come back to your area and know that you can shoot the atmosphere of your world, the type of people who live in your world, in terms of the pace that they run at, in terms of the type of presence that they have, whether each area of the world has its own kind of feel to it. And so you take people in Vienna, they're a lot different to people in, say, Hamburg. They're a lot different to people in Paris. They're definitely a lot different to people in Vietnam or America or, Hawaii or here in Keswick. And my point really is that, if you take Fargo, which is a great example of this world, or even this is how Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul were made, in terms of you take that world and you take the fundamental parts which build that world together, the kind of unconsciousness which lives throughout all the consciousness, and you put that on screen. You find the truth and authenticity, and you're able to film that, hopefully, and you aim to film that, and you aim to film moments in their lives and kind of the little idiosyncrasies which make up that area. Hitchcock talked about this in Bodega Bay. It's like there are certain types of people who will come from a different area. So let's say a girl from San Francisco comes to live in Bodega Bay, or was it Los Angeles? I can't remember. We're talking about Vertigo as well. He did the exact same kind of thing. Definitely take that world and make it a part of your film. Even the sounds, even the types of characters that you get there, if you find like that kind of hot fuzz idea of take those characters and place them throughout the world, is kind of like a sprinkling. And that's more important than coming up with some kind of story, some kind of metaphor, or taking a place and, let's say, trying to suck it dry of what may happen here, in a kind of like Midsummer Murders type thing. You don't need to do that. You can just kind of use the word for what it is, like, say, The Trip did. So when you think of a film like, say, Before Sunrise or Chungking Express or Stalker or Naked or any of these kind of very atmospheric style films that enter into kind of my top 5 favourites, we're talking about worlds which really, they almost rely on their poetry, they almost rely on the atmosphere to make them what they are, and the characters, we go into their head, and that's the kind of atmosphere which they emit from it. That's why we see the world through that lens. That's why the cinematic language is what it is for each individual film in a different way. So And the sound works that way as well, and the score. It's like one big kind of orchestra which works together in order to say that is that character, or that is that set of characters. So one of the things this opens you up for is the poetry of day-to-day life. And I think in films like Before Sunrise, where they talk about this specifically, and I've done videos on this before, is you want to capture the truth of a location. You want to capture that authenticity, but in a way which is like a moment by moment conditional. The action is conditional to the scene. I think that's the best way of doing it. I personally try and aim for that kind of way. There are different little tweaks you have on different types of scenes, I think. And that's all kind of, once you figure this out, once you get the actors, once you figure out that you can shoot in specific types of ways that isn't subjective to some kind of grand plan that you had at the beginning. It's like you get here, you set up the camera, and you get what you get, really. You get what you're given. And you have to work with that. So really you want to be shooting not a kind of like straight up dialogue scene. You want to be shooting something which you know from that world, and it's not like even you could bring your actors here for months and they still maybe wouldn't really kind of get it. The only way to really kind of get it, I feel like, with an actor is to, apart from if they're any good, is to have them improvise and just let them sit in the moment, maybe play them music, maybe get them sat here for a little while so they get kind of accustomed to the environment, they get on that pace, on that beats per minute. And then hopefully they've got it from there and they can go off and then run with it. So is that all that makes a film? Well, no, it isn't. Of course it isn't. You do want some kind of, I don't want to say action, because then it implies that you need something to happen, when the best films, the poetry of day-to-day life, is really when nothing happens. And yet it's fascinating to watch because it's truth. It's real life as we know it, as we can relate to. But you do need something to actually happen. So if you have a difference of location, if you have different scenes, like say for Stalker for example, if you have different scenes one after the other and different things are going on within those scenes, even if it's high kind of tension and high kind of stakes going on, a rush, adrenaline going on, high beats per minute, and then maybe a more kind of poetic low beats per minute. There's nothing to say that there isn't something poetic about the high beats per minute, but I feel like, you know, we love to kind of drift away into that long shot of the low beats per minute and kind of get lost in those ideas, as you would if you were coming up here for maybe a holiday. You want to get lost, you want to get kind of soaked into the world. You don't want to be talking at a pace like this where you're not completely present at all, and it's like, I just want to get the video done so I can drive home because I'm driving home tonight and I want to get the video done before the lights go out. And it's like, how fast am I talking? Am I, you know, at a pace which matches the world? Well, no, I'm not. And when you're on a set, this is the kind of pace which you'll be at. If you're neurotic like me, you'll come to this kind of pace. And I am not like this when I shoot films. This is because I'm doing the videos, and no, yes, it doesn't matter. It does matter. But to me, talking at a pace like this is a failure. You must understand that. So being present, being kind of it does get the job done though. So being present and being kind of true to who you are and relaxed and chilled out, take a second to chill out, then you can enjoy the place that you're at, you can enjoy the pace that you're running at. What have we got behind us? Beautiful day, you know, what a sight. And am I complaining that it's a bit cold? A little bit. But if you're out here just kind of enjoying the view, you take it in. Films aren't meant to be that kind of postcard shot where you take in the view and that's it. They are meant to do a little bit more than that. They're meant to have a little bit more depth as to why you chose that painting, why you chose that particular shot, that frame, the specific frame that you picked, the specific amount of light that you've let into the lens, that idea of what's in the frame and what's out of it. Why have you picked it? It's not just for a view. It's not just so you can hang it on your wall and say, there's a picture of a bucket, there's a picture of a bowl of fruit. It's so because it says something to you. And what does it say? What does Fargo say to the Coen brothers? What does Stalker say to Andrei Tarkovsky? What does going through Chungking Mansion say to Wong Kar-wai? What does that area of New York, not Manhattan, say about Goodfellas? What does that area of New York say about Mean Streets? What does that area of New York running through Manhattan say about Taxi Driver? And what does that few blocks mean in After Hours? What does that one street mean in Eyes Wide Shut? The point is, I think you get it. the idea that a type of, even one street, even one house can have its own world. There is nothing in life that cannot be uniquely cinematic. It just, some things are not. Because you're not in alignment with them. I think that's all it is you're not in alignment with that at that time. Maybe at a different time in your life that would have made it into your world, that would have been part of the furniture, part of the building that you've built, and this is the film. But at this point it's not, and you've failed because you pointed the camera at something that shouldn't be in that world. Some things can be transplanted, but not really. So you want to be shooting the things which are important. So when you move from moment to moment to moment, it's like going from chord to chord to chord in a song. It's like going from color to color to color. Maybe you don't always want the same color, and it doesn't mean you should have Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat or something as part of your film sheet. You see those charts all the time of the colours which, the theme in which the film was shot in, the kind of overall grade nowadays. And it's like, well, if you have to grade it that way, you haven't captured it, have you? You haven't captured that one. You've almost faked it. And yeah, there's a little shift that you can do which helps, of course, and sometimes you capture the world and then you add something on it to make it a bit more surreal. Sure, that's artistic license sometimes, but I feel like if you have to grade it, sometimes you've failed to capture the essence of somewhere, which is probably better than what you can come up with in a color lab, on Premiere. So it's really like you're playing the keyboard and you're going from chord to chord to chord, and you know that you're in that key and you can't really shift from that key because that is the chord progression. You can't go out of that. I don't know a lot about music, but I do know that if you try and do a discord, then you better have a fucking good reason to do it. It better make sense, it better sound right. And the only way, is to play it, to find out, to come here on a location recce and to figure out, is that part of my world? Am I making sure that's part of my world? Then if it is, great. If it isn't, what a shame. Pick somewhere else. Sometimes the location is part of your world, but if it's all the way in the Lake District and you have to come all this fucking way to get it, it's a long journey. It's 5 hours from Birmingham. It's 8 hours from London. So if you're coming up for one shot, which is really what I recommend a lot of the time, what are you doing? You're wasting your time, really, unless it's so fucking important. And I mean, like, it's the reason why you wanted to make the film. You don't have to do it, and there are other times where you do really have to do it. Really think about that with every single shot. If it's round the corner from one location, you still should really think about whether it's absolutely necessary to be in your film. But absolutely necessary to be in your film. But it's just around the corner, so it ain't the end of the world if you just go get it real quick. But you also dilute it when you do things like that. When you're first starting out, you're gonna want to shoot locally, and this is from someone who's going to Europe, making films where on this particular project, it needs to be big. It needs to be Wolf of Wall Street big. So, do you have the budget? Well, no, you don't. But what is big in terms of personality? It doesn't have to be riches sometimes. It can be type of what they value. So what does someone who's big in personality value? They value different sites. They value extremes. And so it makes sense that you would go to extremes for that film, because everywhere which is an extreme says something. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that everywhere that extreme means that you have to go all the way across the country, although it does help. But a lot of the extremes that I've done for this film are just in London. Now, London was a central point. I live in Birmingham. London's a central point where it's like the extreme city in the UK. And I've gone to other extreme cities for this film, thereby kind of breaking the own rule that I just said. But it helps to be logistical and practical and do it on the cheap, where I'm doing this for under like $1,000. I mean, what's your excuse then to not go to Europe sometimes if you're trying to do that type of character? If you're trying to be big, it's like fake it so it looks like you made it, right? I know the actual phrase, but the point is that I'm going big in that kind of value sense. So you are shooting around the corner from where your base of operations is, from where your shots which matter so much are. So I just found locations in and around that area which are idiosyncratic with that world. So it makes sense that these are the type of places that they hang out at that time in their lives. And I'm shooting them in a way which is kind of atmospheric yet to the character, but from moments, from that kind of place of my childhood, from the place of where I was at when I went through some of the kind of themes which are present in the film, that kind of wavelength that you're on. You're aligned with the film mentally, and maybe in a few years you will not be aligned at all. You will look back and go, well, that's who I was then. Now I'm at a different paradigm. Even the word paradigm aligns with this film. So the type of dialogue which makes it into the film can be aligned with the film, aligned with where the characters are at that time. It doesn't mean you have to go out and kill people if you're making a film about a murderer, right? But the type of sounds will align, that you don't have to use all the sounds which encompass London. You can use specific sounds which encompass that world that they may be accustomed to hearing, that they may have heard at some point in their story, whatever their story is. If you take The Irishman, Frank Sheeran, what are the particular things which he remembers from the story that he's telling as a narration? And then what does he remember now at the late stage of his life? There's different then. What is different to him? What is different to that character? And how would the story look if it was Joe Pesci's story in that film? So one of the main reasons why I've come here is because this is a shot in the film which I am not going to use. I am not going to do. I'm not going to rent out a camera, bring it all the way up here, set up a shot, get that shot, take it all the way back, and then I've wasted a day's worth that I could be filming. I don't have to do this. If Werner Herzog talks about this with Fitzcarraldo. It's like he moved the boat up the mountain across, and it was a difficult trek. But you don't have to have that boat deep in the bloody rainforest. It can be at the start of the rainforest where the base camp is. There is a point where the atmosphere makes sense where it is. And then to go further is just causing yourself a lot of pain. I could have shot this up there. This shot that I'm doing now, I could have shot it all the way up there through the forest. I even did trek through the forest in order to try out the location, thinking, if it's close, I'll go and set up the camera there and do it there. With here, my car's right there. I can see it. So it makes sense that I've come here and done this. It's freezing cold. We're only human after all. And I mean, it's a nice shot, and the atmosphere makes sense. And it sounds like I'm making excuses. I really like this place a lot better than I would have liked it up there as well. You just know sometimes that That's the atmosphere. That's the world I want. That's what I want to show. And this shot was going to be part of an arc in the character's journey. Why I need that shot when it clearly to me feels like an establishing shot. So that makes sense why it gets cut. The logistics reason is not as important a reason to cut it, well, there is a reason, as coming all the way up here and cutting it because it's not come from some kind of meditative state of it's appeared almost like it's a calling to me, almost like, you know, I've plucked it on a hook on a fishing line, like David Lynch would say, that this idea is just formulated out of nothing, and it's amazing. And is this amazing as a shot? Well, it matters to me, to my childhood. It matters to the inspiration for the film that I'm making. So is it important to come here and get this type of shot? Well, yes, but I could probably do it a few streets down from my house, and it would make a lot more sense for the character. I've done this because this is UK. My inspiration is Sweden, LA, these type of people, these type of, I mean, I know that those are a type of people. What I mean is that the type of people that I've been inspired by, these kind of influences for this film, YouTubers, gurus, etc., they come to these kind of places and get these kind of shots. And it's like, that makes sense that I would come to this kind of place and get this kind of shot. A lot of people can go overboard with this whole key change idea, the colours changing, the journey arc of it, and where they start and where they end. It's like you change clothes multiple times in terms of colour. You know, he starts in a red shirt, he then becomes more kind of brown as his life kind of unravels, and then by the end of it, he takes a total shift and goes to a blue shirt, or, you know, starts to turn to yellow and then goes to a blue shirt. They did that with the Breaking Bad colour chart, and I don't think it works quite as, you know, obviously as they make it sound. Although there is a clear change. And, you know, you can do this with, he's bald at the start, then he shaves, then he, you know, has a toupee for a little bit, you know, then he's really muscular or something, and then he's, you know, really like the Machinist, like Christian Bale in The Machinist, really thin. And it's like, you don't need to go through all of that to make a film to show that someone's changed, because all that's highlighting is that you don't know how to do a character change without them physically going through a transformation, or something happening with the clothing or the props, the costumes or the props, and maybe with the atmosphere. You know, if you just repeatedly change locations, all you're doing is changing locations, and it's not that interesting. What's interesting is the poetry of it. Is there poetry in those shots from moment to moment? And is the kind of collective going from that shot to that shot to that shot, then in the edit, make it kind of greater than the sum of its parts, make it so that that little section of 3 shots says something about where he was at that point in his life. Now we've jumped ahead a bit, and yeah, maybe he's in a teal jumper now, and it's like, he's changed. Yeah, that's a sign that he's changed, but that's a sign that these are the kind of shirts that he likes to wear, not that he's changed because his shirt's changed. It's probably more so that he feels like this now. And that can be dangerous as well. Like, the character feels like this, so I'm just going to go with what the character does. It's like, no, you can just do where you come from with your dreams. He can go off in a different direction. He doesn't have to go off where your inspiration has gone off either, although that really does help if you've got characters in the real world who you're inspired by. Take Orson Welles and Citizen Kane. It's like you can see the inspirational character, although I don't know in myself. I know that it was inspired by a particular rich guy who we've been watching basically in Citizen Kane, that is based on, and it's not it's based on him loosely, and really what we're seeing then is cinematic language experimented around this idea that we're being inspired by this guy in the world that has been developed, which is very surreal and separate to maybe the one that he lived in. A very kind of 1984 level depth in atmosphere and world, and kind of brutalism in Citizen Kane, let's say. And you have to be very careful because colours do matter. I'm wearing a black shirt, that says something. Whether I like it or not, it says something subconscious. And you know, it goes deeper than where people are at in their lives, even though it can say a lot about character. So if you change from a teal shirt to a yellow shirt to a brown shirt to a red shirt, you're kind of muddying the water of whatever amazing revelation has come out of the shoot that you find in the edit and go, that's interesting. I don't know why, but the fact that he was wearing a black shirt there because it felt right, that's really started to matter now. Like, for example, the King of Comedy, he's got that kind of weird checkered costume with the mustache and the toupee. It really kind of, it's such a weird costume choice, but it makes sense for who the guy is, and it kind of makes sense for the style of that film, weirdly. And I can't put my finger on why, even though I've heard the story of where the costume came from, that they walked around and found a costume shop and that was the one that De Niro wanted. So, or maybe Scorsese wanted it. One of them wanted it. So that was the costume that Rupert Pupkin had from then on. And it's like, you know, why does After Hours start with that black shirt and then he changes shirts out, you know, over the course of the night? It's like he almost had to do that so you can see the character development there, not deliberately, but in a way which is like, we're moving on now, keep up with us, it's getting a bit more interesting as we're moving on to a different atmosphere, and it's not important, don't worry about it, just watch it and enjoy it. I feel that lighting as well can show this, whereby because I like to shoot at night, because I have a lot more control over night and lighting than I do during the day. I mean, the lights change like 3 fucking times already. If I'm shooting at night, I have a lot more control, so I could shoot in a really well-lit car park or a really well-lit supermarket or something by running around without permission, and or you get permission. If you need to. Anyway, that's a different video. But if I'm shooting at night here, I'm fucked, ain't I? But if you're shooting down the road at a village, you got those dimly lit lights on. With a good enough camera, you can get that. So you're going from that big bright supermarket to the dimly lit light, and it's like, that is a change in location and atmosphere. And even if you had a well lit car park in a place like the Lake District, you know, like a well-lit supermarket or exterior of a supermarket, and then you go to a dimly lit village, it's the same area but you're showing a difference. And it's not like you have to do that, but you kind of have to have some kind of interesting difference, because if your shots are all in the same point, then it ain't really gonna work. Even a film like The Lighthouse, which is in the same bloody lighthouse, and the point is to go stir crazy, what we're seeing is a difference throughout the film in terms of the different types of areas which we go to and get to see. So this is about what's in the frame and what's out of it. It's like, what are you allowed to see and what you're not allowed to see until later, because we're saving that. You know, we're showing one side of the city now, and later we're going to see another side of the city. That's why people take those frames out of films and say, oh, you remember this frame? And they look at it and go, where was that? And they go like, oh, that was like halfway through. And it's like, was it there for like a minute or something? Yeah. And the colours are completely different. It's not the world that they thought they knew, because maybe they missed it or they can't quite remember it. I do this all the time with my favourite films. You can take a frame from a scene which I can't really remember, and I'll just be shocked because it's like, that's in my favourite film. I didn't even notice. But because I'm focusing on all the other scenes that are memorable, and maybe that kind of passed over or something, it does help shift the atmosphere at a certain point. It had to have done, but I didn't really notice it. Or you remember the colours differently, you remember that these scenes differently, whereas the shot was in between. Now, if you want to see a lot more of these videos, if you want to see my topics ranging from character to cinematic language to atmosphere to sound to score composition to anything from the philosophy of filmmaking, from just films that you maybe should be watching, I go through all these topics like really in depth quite a lot of the time, and what I'm trying to do is build this kind of like full curriculum of different topics which can be really explored and really kind of, as time goes on, just kind of mastered and dissecting each film one by one, including my own work, including the stuff that's going forward on my own journey. So if you guys are going on a similar kind of journey and you need someone to follow and to kind of work along with and to kind of be a kind of mentor figure for that, then I realise I'm just inviting myself to be your mentor. But this is what I'm planning to do. For that, I'm going to need some money. I'm going to need to be able to fund going out to places like this. I'm going to need to be able to fund making my films, and this is what I want to do for a full-time job. This is, honestly, I love doing this. So if you want to give some money and actually get access to these videos, I went to Boston, I went to New York, I went to Philadelphia, I've been to Vienna, I've been to Prague, I went to all these fancy places. But the reason why I went to these fancy places is because for a start, I wanted to go on a holiday, but I also had to teach there. I had to show you guys absolutely that I am dead serious about this, not just as like a this is how you set up a camera, this is how you want to be using the triangle of exposure and all this, and whilst all of these technical things are important and almost cinematic language to like a mid shot, medium shot, long shot is important, 3-act structure is important, right? But the fact is that a film can be open-ended, so what the fuck is a 3-act structure? The fact is you can do whatever the fuck you like, really. It's just how it's judged in retrospect. Was it good in retrospect? So is it an artistic piece? And if you guys agree, why don't you join up? Why don't you actually go down, press the link, and find these videos, pay for them, and get access to them. And I'll really appreciate that, and I'll be able to make more of them, and I'll be able to fund doing them maybe at a higher production value. Maybe I'll get like some kind of shots of films going on in the corner at the time as well, and that'd be really cool to be able to dissect films as I'm talking about them, maybe. And we shall see where we end up. But the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if I get a little bit of support, and you guys are going to get some great content because of it, because I will just not stop talking about film and the stuff I have to talk about, the philosophy, the depth that I want to go to in this is like I'm going into my own psychology, let alone a filmmaker's kind of how far you can go with cinematic language and the philosophy of how you make a film. It's like, is there just one way to make a film, or is there multiple ways, or is that whole there's multiple ways thing a big lie? So click the link, get those bloody classes going, and you start now. We'll both build up our knowledge together. I encourage fucking comments which are gonna talk about this, which are gonna talk about how we can go a bit further with some of these ideas. I'm working it out the same way you are. I'm learning just as you are, just as Martin Scorsese is still learning now. I want him to be on this channel talking to him about what the fuck is film doing now. You know, where do we go from here now that the greats have come and gone, and now the new greats are here, and now we've got digital, and it's all a bit different, but it's still going to the roots of cinematic language and philosophy. It's like, what can we do with this? Where can we go?